Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I never liked working nights, but bills don't care about your sleep schedule. After my divorce in 2018, I needed something steady, something that'd keep me distracted. That's how I ended up running the graveyard shift at a gas station off Route 16, just outside of New Hanover, Maine. It was one of those lonely spots where truckers stopped for coffee and road-weary travelers asked for directions they'd already missed 10 miles back. The sign out front flickered every few seconds. Inside, it was just me, a row of humming coolers and the soft drone of the old ceiling fan. I worked 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 5 nights a week. Quiet hours mostly, sometimes too quiet. The first night I noticed something was off was a Thursday in late October, the kind of night when fog sits heavy over the highway, and even your headlights seem too tired to push through it. Backstory: the weight of silence. Before that job, I'd been a warehouse photographer in Portland. I'd go out to shoot abandoned buildings for inventory records, old mills, offices, places with peeling paint and that smell of rust and time. I liked the silence then. Silence meant control. After the divorce, that same silence became unbearable. It had weight. I'd lie awake listening to the fridge hum, the pipes groan, my own breathing, and somehow it felt like the house was listening back. So when the job at the gas station opened up, I took it. I figured noise and strangers would be better than silence. Turns out, I was wrong. It started around 1:30 a.m. I was behind the counter restocking cigarette packs when the store phone rang. Now this thing never rang. Not once in the 3 weeks I'd worked there. We had a company line for deliveries and an emergency number for staff. But this was the old landline, one with an actual cord and a faded sticky note that said, "Do not use." I stared at it for a second before picking up. "Speedy Fuel. This is Aaron," I said. Static. Then through the crackle came a faint sound. Not a voice exactly, more like breathing. Slow, ragged, uneven. "Hello?" I asked. "You okay?" The breathing stopped. I hung up, chalked it up to a prank or some drunk guy dialing random stations. But 10 minutes later it rang again. This time I didn't say anything. I just listened. For a few seconds, it was dead air. Then clear, as day, a whisper came through. "Don't hang up." My throat went dry. "Who is this?" No answer. Just static. Then the voice, low, shaky, came again. "It hears you now." Click. The line went dead. The next evening, I told my coworker, Angie, about it. She was in her mid-40s, worked the early shift, and had been there for years. She laughed when I told her. "Oh, that old phone?" she said, lighting a cigarette behind the dumpster. "Yeah, weird stuff happens with that thing sometimes. Don't worry about it." "What kind of weird stuff?" I asked. She shrugged. "You'll hear voices sometimes. The old manager said it used to be connected to some payphone that got ripped out years ago. Probably just feedback from a loose line or some crap." "Yeah, maybe," I said, but her tone didn't sound convinced. Before leaving, she paused at the door. "Hey, if it rings again, don't answer it. Just let it go." Saturday night, the fog came back thicker than before. Barely any customers, just one trucker who filled up and drove off without coming inside. Around 3 a.m., I went to the back to restock the drinks. The cooler always made that steady hum, the kind of background noise you stop noticing after a while. That night, it stopped. I froze with a crate of soda in my hands. The silence pressed in on my ears. Then, from the far side of the cooler, where the back wall met the racks, I heard a faint click, like a phone receiver being lifted. "Angie?" I called out, though I knew damn well I was alone. Nothing. I set the crate down and leaned around the aisle. The light above the cooler flickered once, then steadied. I stepped closer and realized there was an old door behind the cooler shelves. I'd never noticed it before. A utility room, maybe? When I tried the handle, it didn't budge. The metal was cold, colder than it should have been. I leaned in to listen and heard something that made my stomach turn. Breathing. Faint, slow, and coming from the other side of that door. I backed away, locked up early, and sat in my car for 20 minutes before driving off. When I came in, Sunday night, Angie was already halfway out the door. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, glancing at the circles under my eyes. "That phone rang again," I told her. "And there's something in the cooler room." Her face went pale. "You opened it?" "Tried to." She shook her head. "Don't. That room was sealed years ago. Some electrician got electrocuted back there in the 90s. They never fixed the wiring, just walled it off." I stared at her. "Then what's the door doing there?" "Beats me. But don't go back there, all right?" Later that night, the phone rang again. Same one. The old corded phone with the "do not use" note. I stared at it for a long minute before hitting record on my cell and picking it up. At first, just static. Then a voice. Male. Tired. Whispering. "If you can hear this, don't. Talk back." My hand tightened around the receiver. "It learns your voice," the man continued. "It listens through the hum through the wires. Once it knows you, it follows the sound." Static surged again, and then, through the distortion, I heard something faint. My name. Not just my name. My full name. I dropped the phone. The Z recording on my cell captured everything, but when I played it back, all I heard was white noise and what sounded like distant whispering under it, like 100 overlapping voices trying to breathe at once. I thought about quitting, but rent was due and I couldn't afford to lose another job. So I came back Monday night, half expecting the power to be out or the phone to be gone. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Around midnight, a local guy came in. A regular named Dale, who drove for a delivery company. He bought coffee, made small talk, then asked if I was doing all right. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "Something like that," I muttered. He leaned closer. "You heard it, didn't you?" I blinked. "Heard what?" He lowered his voice. "The voice on the line. Everyone who's worked here long enough hears it. My cousin used to do night shifts before he went missing. Said the phone calls started about a week before." I laughed nervously. "You're messing with me." Dale shook his head. "No joke, man. Don't answer that phone again. Don't even touch it. If it calls your name, leave. Doesn't matter if it's outside or on the radio or through your damn car speakers. Leave." Then he paid and left, without another word. It happened Tuesday. The night started like every other. Quiet, half-asleep boredom. But when I went to grab a soda, the door behind the cooler was open. Not just unlocked. Wide open. Cold air poured out and something deep inside made a soft whirring sound like an old tape recorder. I turned my flashlight on and saw writing carved into the inside wall. Hundreds of overlapping lines scratched into the plaster. "Don't. Speak, it hears. Stay quiet." At the center of the wall, drawn in what looked like black ash, were circles, spirals moving inward, tighter and tighter, until they stopped at a small square box on the floor. A reel-to-reel recorder. One of the reels was still turning. I wanted to run, but my body didn't move. The tape hissed, then a voice, barely audible, came through. "You shouldn't have answered." The air shifted, the light behind me flickered, and the hum of the cooler stopped again. In that silence, I heard it. Breathing. Right behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking. Nothing there, just rows of soda bottles reflecting the beam. Then faintly the sound of the store phone ringing. I don't remember grabbing my phone. Don't remember hitting record. All I know is I picked up the receiver, hand trembling. "Aaron." The voice was soft, almost gentle. My chest tightened. "What do you want?" "It already knows your voice," it whispered. "Don't hang up, or it'll forget you." Then silence. The line went dead, but the breathing didn't stop. It was everywhere now, behind the counter, through the vents under the floor. I unplugged the phone from the wall, but I could still hear it, the faint click of the receiver lifting somewhere in the room. I stumbled outside, gasping for air, and drove straight home. The next morning, Angie called me. "You all right? You left the register open." "I'm done," I said. "I'm not coming back." There was a pause. Then she said quietly, "Yeah, I figured." 2 days later, the gas station caught fire. They said it started near the cooler wiring. No one was hurt. No one was there. The fire report said the room behind the cooler didn't exist. No foundation, no wiring, no door. I moved 2 towns over and deleted the recording from my phone. Or at least I thought I did. Sometimes when I'm editing photos late at night again, I'll hear it. A faint click, like a phone being picked up somewhere close. Then that breathing, slow, ragged, patient. And if I sit still too long, I swear I can hear my name, whispered through the static. I never planned to work at a cemetery. When I first moved to Ashbrook, I was just looking for a quiet job, something that didn't require talking to people. The town was small, tucked between the pine ridges and the railroad line that hadn't run in years. After my divorce, I wanted silence more than anything. My brother used to joke that I could probably live among the dead and not notice. Turns out he wasn't far off. Ashbrook Cemetery sat at the end of Willow Creek Road, about a mile past the last streetlight. It wasn't big, maybe 30 acres at most, but old, Civil War old. Some of the stones were so worn you could barely read a letter. The kind of place where fog gathers low and lingers all morning. I took the job in March, right before the rain started. It rained for 3 days straight. Cold, misty, endless. The kind that seeps into your clothes, your bones, your thoughts. I was patching the fence along the North Ridge when I first saw her, a woman in a long black dress, walking through the rows with an umbrella that looked like something out of another century. At first I thought she was family visiting a grave, but as I watched, I realized she wasn't heading toward any of the newer sections. She moved straight, for the far eastern edge, where the ground dips toward the line of old oaks that marked the oldest burials in the lot. I remember how deliberate her movements were. Slow, graceful, like someone walking through memory. She carried a small bundle of white lilies. That first day I didn't approach her, just watched from the tool shed as she knelt before a patch of grass. No headstone, no marker, nothing. She stayed there for maybe 15 minutes, not moving. Then she placed the lilies down, stood and walked off through the mist, without looking back. When she passed the gate, I noticed something strange. The wet gravel didn't hold her footprints. By Sunday, she returned. Same time, 4:30 sharp. Same dress, same veil, same lilies. I'd started to wonder if she was a relative of one of the older caretakers. We had an office record book that went back to the 1880s, so I checked. No one buried where she knelt, just empty plot numbers. The last burial near that section had been in 1912. That second Sunday, I decided to speak to her. When I saw her coming through the gate, I wiped my hands on my coat, trying to look professional, though I probably looked more like a wet dog. The rain hadn't stopped all week, and the mud was ankle-deep in some spots. As she knelt again, I stepped closer. "Afternoon, ma'am. You come here regular?" She didn't answer at first. The rain tapped softly against her umbrella. Then, without looking up, she said in a quiet, lilting tone, like someone humming a memory, "Every Sunday." Her voice made the hair on my arms rise. "Mind if I ask who you're visiting?" I said, trying to keep my voice even. She tilted her head slightly, the black lace of her veil trembling with each word. "My keeper." I frowned. "Your keeper?" "Yes," she whispered. "He watched over us. He tended the ground. He kept the gate." Something in her tone, the way she said us instead of me, sent a chill straight down my back. Before I could ask more, she stood. She set one last lily on the ground, nodded to the empty space, and turned away. "Wait," I called. "What was his name?" She paused at the path's edge, her veil fluttering. "He had many names," she said softly. "But you call him Mr. Harlan now, don't you?" That stopped me cold. Mr. Harlan had been the caretaker before me, an older man who died suddenly last fall. Heart failure, they said. Found sitting upright in the chapel like he'd fallen asleep mid-prayer. I'd only met him once during my interview. "How do you know that name?" I asked. But she was already walking away, her black dress vanishing, into the fog like smoke drawn into the trees. That night, the rain turned fierce. The cemetery looked like a drowning field. Water pooling between the graves, the trees bending under the wind. Around midnight I heard something loud, a sharp crack like a tree splitting. Lantern in hand, I went out. The mud sucked at my boots as I pushed through the storm. When I reached the eastern path, I stopped dead. Mr. Harlan's headstone had split perfectly in half. The break was clean, smooth as glass, gleaming with rainwater, and resting at the base on a single white lily. I hadn't seen lilies in that section before. I knelt to touch it, and the petals were warm. That was when I heard the bell, the old chapel bell. It rang once, low and hollow, though the chapel doctor was locked and no one was inside. The next morning I told the parish clerk, old Mr. Beecham, what I'd seen. He looked uneasy. "You sure it wasn't vandals? Kids come through there sometimes." "Not in that weather," I said, "and the break, it wasn't from force, it looked precise." He rubbed his chin, thinking. "You said a woman in black, right?" "Yeah. Pale voice carries lilies." He went to the cabinet and pulled out a thin, dust-caked book. "We had a Miss Ada Wren buried there. Lived near the rectory, right up to the 1890s. Came every week to see the groundskeeper who passed. Never missed a Sunday. Folks said she lost her mind after he died." "What happened to her?" He hesitated. "Found her dead one morning by the oaks, kneeling by his grave." I blinked. "But there's no grave there." He sighed. "There was. The stone fell sometime in the 50s. We never replaced it. Records say she wanted no name carved. Said it was only for him to know." That Sunday I waited for her. The rain had stopped, but the fog was thicker than ever, curling low between the stones. When the church bell finished its last toll, I saw her coming. Same hour, same path. This time I didn't hide. "Miss Wren," I said quietly as she approached, "I know who you are." She stopped, her hands tightening around the lilies. "Do you? You were buried here, a long time ago." The veil shifted. I saw the faint curve of a smile. "Then why do you still hear me walking?" Her voice was soft, but the air around her felt suddenly cold. The fog seemed to thicken, pressing close. "Why do you come here?" I asked. "Why him? Why the lilies?" "He kept us," she whispered. "All who sleep beneath these trees." He spoke kindly to the forgotten ones. He never left, not even when the world did. And so, when the bell tolls, we keep him company still. "We?" I repeated. She tilted her head toward the graves around. "You don't hear them?" For the first time I noticed the quiet wasn't complete. Beneath the drizzle, a faint sound, like whispers drifting through leaves. Then she looked at me, and though her eyes were hidden behind the lace, I could feel them. Cold, distant, but knowing. "You keep the gate now," she said softly. "Do you watch the dead as he did?" I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. "I try to." She nodded once. "Then soon, you'll see them too." The wind stirred, and in that instant, she was gone. Not walked away, just gone. Only the lilies remained, their petals beaded with rain. For weeks, nothing happened. But I started noticing little things. Tools moved in the shed overnight. The chapel door, always locked, would be open in the morning. Candles burned halfway down, though I hadn't lit them. Then one night, while fixing the light over the front gate, I saw her again, standing under the oaks, her black dress glimmering faintly in the moonlight. I called out, but she didn't move. Instead, she lifted her hand and pointed toward the chapel. Something in my chest tightened. I walked toward it, the gravel crunching underfoot. The chapel door creaked open easily. Inside, it was dark, the smell of damp wood and wax heavy in the air, and then a sound, a soft, dragging noise. From the back pew, I raised my lantern. Sitting upright in the final pew was a man, or what looked like one. His face pale, waxy, like clay molded into human shape. Eyes open, staring straight ahead. The name tag on his chest said Harlan, the same Harlan whose grave had split. Before I could react, the bell above me tolled. Once, twice, 3 times. Each strike echoing through my bones. When I turned, she was standing in the doorway. "You shouldn't have followed," she said. "He's still keeping watch." I took a step back. "What do you want from me?" Her veil lifted slightly, and beneath it her face was pale as the moon. "To remember," she whispered. "All we ever wanted was to be remembered." Then the candlelight flickered out. When it returned, the pew was empty. Both of them, gone. That night I packed my bags. But when I stepped outside, something stopped me. The sound of the chapel bell again. Except it wasn't ringing from the tower. It was ringing inside my head. Every Sunday since, she comes. Every Sunday, the lilies appear on Harlan's broken stone. And now sometimes, when the fog is heavy and I'm closing the gate, I hear her voice just behind me. Soft, close, almost kind. "Keep watch, Thomas," she whispers. "Keep the gate." Last night, I woke to see the reflection in my window. 2 dark handprints resting gently on my shoulders. Only this time they weren't made of mud. They were made of ash. And when I brushed them away, the faint smell of lilies filled the room. I was 34 when I took the job that still keeps me up some nights. Back then, I worked for the County Maintenance Division out of Rowan County, Kentucky. A small, quiet patch of land where time moves slower and folks talk faster. My job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Mowing ditches, fixing road signs, and clearing old lots that the county wanted tidied up. Most of it was dull work. Until that fall. It was a Wednesday evening when my supervisor, Rick Halper, called me into the office. He was leaning back in his chair, chewing on a toothpick, the brim of his cap shadowing his eyes. "Got something weird for you, Jesse," he said. "You ever heard of Briar Hollow Cemetery?" I shook my head. "Can't say I have," he grunted. Not surprised. It's been off the county map since the early 90s. Old graveyard up by Mill Creek Road. Used to belong to a private church, burned down after the caretaker's house caught fire. County wants us to clear the access path and fix the fence. Kid's been sneaking in again. You want the hours? Overtime? I asked. He smirked. Double. But I'm telling you, don't stick around after dark. Locals got stories about that place, I laughed. Rick, everyone around here's got stories about something haunted. Yeah, he said, tapping the toothpick on his desk. But this one's got a body count. That should have been my sign to say no. But money was tight and I had a baby on the way. I told him I'd take it. By the time I drove out there the next day, the sky was already bleeding orange. The road turned from asphalt to gravel, then to dirt. The deeper I went, the quieter it got, like the woods swallowed every bit of sound. My GPS went blank halfway in. No service, no signal. The entrance wasn't much to look at. Just a rusted archway with Briar Hollow barely legible through the rust. The gates were missing and thick vines had crawled up the posts like they were trying to drag them underground. My truck barely fit through the brush-choked path. When I stepped out, the air hit me in the face. Heavy, damp, and cold enough to sting. The smell of wet earth and something faintly metallic hung in the air. "Place looks like hell," I muttered. I grabbed my work gloves, a pair of shears, and my flashlight, then got to work cutting back the overgrowth near the fence line. The sound of snapping vines echoed louder than it should have. After a while, I started talking to myself just to fill the silence. Then I heard something like footsteps on gravel. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my hand. "Hello, county maintenance. Anyone out here?" "Nothing." Just the rustle of trees. I tried to shake it off. Probably just a deer. But when I turned back toward the old caretaker's house, what was left of it, I saw light, a pale glow flickering through one of the blackened windows. It wasn't firelight. It was too steady. Like a lantern, I called out again. Hey, you can't be in there. This property's under county control. No response. The light stayed still, pulsing faintly. Against my better judgment, I headed toward it. The house, or what was left, was a skeleton of brick and ash. Most of the roof had collapsed, and the air inside smelled like rain on charcoal. I stepped carefully over the debris, my boots crunching on glass and charred wood. That's when I saw it. A lantern hanging from a rusted nail in the wall, its flame glowing soft and blue. And next to it, half buried in the dirt, was a brass nameplate attached to a ring of old keys. I wiped off the soot and read the engraving. E. Latham, groundskeeper. The name sounded familiar. I couldn't place it, but I'd definitely heard it before. Then I remembered. Rick had mentioned the caretaker's name when he told me the job details. Ernest Latham, the man who'd supposedly died in the fire back in 1989. His body was never recovered. I pocketed the keys without thinking. That was mistake number one. By the time I'd finished trimming and loading debris, the sun had disappeared. A thick mist rolled in from the woods, curling between the graves like breath from the earth itself. The crickets had gone silent. The wind, too. That's when I noticed something that froze my blood. My truck's headlights were on. I knew I'd shut them off. The keys were in my jacket pocket. I jogged over, muttering, "Don't do this to me." But when I reached the truck, I saw something reflected in the windshield. A shape. Someone standing behind me. I spun around. There he was, an old man in a scorched uniform, lantern in hand. His face was half burned, the skin waxy and folded like melted plastic. His eyes were black pits that caught the light in a way that didn't make sense. He just stood there, breathing slow. Then, in a voice that sounded like it came from under the ground, he said, "You're on my grounds." I backed up fast, my boots slipping in the mud. "Hey man, I'm with the county." He raised the lantern higher. "Grounds are closed. Leave them clean." The air dropped 10 degrees. My breath fogged. My flashlight flickered out. Then the lantern went dark. I don't remember running. I just remember breaking through the trees and not stopping until I hit the gravel road. When I finally looked back, there was nothing but fog. I came back the next morning with Rick and another worker named Bo. Rick looked skeptical but uneasy. "You sure you didn't just see your own reflection?" "Rick," I said, pointing to the dirt by my truck, "somebody was standing right there." He leaned down. There were footprints, bare, blackened, and deep. Bo frowned. "Ain't no way those are fresh. We didn't say much after that." But when I opened my truck door, my keys, those old brass ones, were sitting neatly on the driver's seat. I hadn't put them there, and carved into the windshield from the inside were 4 words: "Keep the grounds clean." I quit the county a week later. Told him it was health reasons. Truth was, I couldn't sleep without seeing that lantern glow behind my eyelids. A few months after, they fenced Briar Hollow off for good. Tall chain link, barbed wire on top. Nobody goes near it anymore, not the kids, not even the hunters. But sometimes, when I'm driving down Mill Creek late at night, I still see it. A faint yellow light moving slow between the trees, weaving through the fog. Like someone out there still walking the fence line, still tending the graves, still keeping the grounds clean. I was 31 when I took the night caretaker job at Pine Hollow Cemetery, just outside the town of Redfield, Pennsylvania. Back then, I wasn't looking for anything other than quiet. I'd lost my job at the steel plant after it shut down. My marriage had fallen apart not long after, and I was staying in a rented duplex that smelled faintly of mildew and loneliness. So when the township office posted a flyer looking for a part-time cemetery groundskeeper, I figured, why not? It paid little, but it came with a small cabin on the property. The quiet sounded like exactly what I needed. Pine Hollow wasn't a big cemetery, but it was old, the kind of place that didn't make it onto local maps anymore. The older section was set deep in the trees, stones so weathered you could barely read the names. Moss and lichen crawled over marble angels. Even during the day, it carried that heavy stillness you only find around places that have seen too much grief. My first week was uneventful. I'd unlock the rusted front gate, check for vandalism, sweep the chapel steps, trim the overgrown grass along the paths, and log any maintenance in an old notebook left by the last caretaker, someone named Harold Reeves. He'd worked there for nearly 20 years, according to the log. His handwriting started steady, neat cursive, but toward the end it turned jittery and uneven. The last entry, dated March 12, 1994, simply read, "He's walking again." I didn't think much of it at the time, probably an inside joke. By the second week, I'd settled into the rhythm of night shifts. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, play the radio low in the cabin, and read while the cicadas hummed outside. The job was simple. Check the grounds twice a night, make sure no one had jumped the fence, but there was something about the stillness of that place that started to get under my skin. Every night after midnight, it felt like the air got thicker, like the woods around the cemetery leaned in closer. One night around 1 a.m., I was walking the back path near the old Civil War section when I heard it, metal clinking softly like a chain being dragged. I froze. The wind had died down completely. I turned my flashlight toward the sound, and the beam caught the outline of something tall standing between the headstones. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No response. The figure didn't move, but I could see the faint shimmer of brass buttons on what looked like an old military coat. A dark blue, almost black, long wool jacket, the kind I'd only ever seen in museums. I took a step forward. "Sir, you're not supposed to be in here, still nothing." Just that silence pressing in, and then it turned. Slow, deliberate. Not startled, not curious, just turned like it had expected me. The flashlight trembled in my hand as the beam caught his face. Pale, expressionless eyes dark and sunken. His skin looked stretched thin like paper left too long in the sun. I blinked, and he was gone. Just gone. The trees behind him didn't even sway like someone had moved through them. I went back to the cabin, locked the door, and sat with the lights on until sunrise. The next morning, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe some local kid in a costume was screwing with me. But when I went out to check the spot, I found something I couldn't shake. In the damp soil, clear as day, were boot prints, heavy, old-fashioned, pressed deep into the ground. The pattern looked like hobnails, something you'd see on Civil War boots. Not modern shoes. I reported it to the township the next morning, and the secretary, a woman named Eileen, gave a soft laugh. "Oh, you must have seen the Union Man," she said. "The what?" "People around here have been talking about him since I was a kid. Some say he's one of the soldiers buried out there who never got his name carved in stone. Don't let it spook you, hun. Every caretaker swears they've seen him." I tried to brush it off. Still, that night I kept the lights in the cabin burning until dawn. 2 weeks later, the unease turned into something else, something personal. It was raining that night. Light drizzle tapping on the roof of the cabin. Around midnight I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, the kind of walk you feel in your chest more than hear. I thought maybe a deer had wandered close. So I stepped out with my flashlight. Nothing, just fog curling around the tombstones, thick enough to swallow the beam. I turned to go back inside and nearly dropped the light. Standing by the gate, maybe 30 yards away, was him, the man in the uniform. Still, silent, watching. "Hey," I shouted, stepping forward. "You need to leave. This is private property." He didn't move. Didn't even blink. The rain slid down his hat and coat, but his clothes didn't darken like they weren't even getting wet. I took one more step and he lifted his arm, just slightly, and pointed toward the woods behind me. Then, as my flashlight flickered, he was gone again. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd meant by that gesture. By dawn, I decided to check the woods. There was a narrow trail that looped behind the older graves, leading to a small stream. Halfway down, I found something that didn't belong. A wooden cross, barely a foot tall, stuck in the earth. No name, just a rusted tin star nailed to it. Behind it, the ground looked disturbed, like it had been dug up long ago and refilled. I brought it up to Eileen the next day. "Old Harold used to mention that spot," she said. "Town records say they buried unclaimed soldiers there during the war. No markers, just field graves. Poor souls." She gave me a sad smile. "Maybe he's just looking for recognition." Weeks passed without incident, and I started to believe maybe I'd imagined it all, until one cold November night. The generator had cut out around 2 a.m., and I was outside trying to restart it when I heard faint humming, like a low, rhythmic tune carried through fog. It sounded almost military, a marching cadence, old and tired. I turned off the flashlight and just listened. The humming grew louder, closer, and then footsteps, crunching over gravel. Slow, steady. I backed away, heart pounding. "Who's there?" No response, just that same humming, rising into what sounded like a voice singing under its breath. The words were too faint to make out, but the tone, low and mournful, felt like grief itself given sound. I stumbled back toward the cabin, slammed the door shut, and pressed my back against it, listening. The footsteps stopped outside the porch, and then 3 knocks. Slow. Even. Knock. 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 I whispered to myself, "Don't open it. Don't you dare open it." But curiosity can be stronger than fear. I eased toward the peephole. Nothing. Just rain falling through fog. Then, right as I turned to step away, a pale hand pressed against the glass from the other side. I jumped back so fast I nearly tripped over the chair. By the time I gathered myself, the hand was gone. The next morning, I found the same boot prints leading up to my porch, but none leading away. That was the moment it stopped being just a story. I went into town, talked to Pastor Jeffries, who'd been doing burials there for decades. When I told him what I'd seen, his expression turned grim. "Son, there's things on that ground older than this town itself," he said quietly. "Soldiers, yes, but also folks who died forgotten. The war ended, but not for all of them. Sometimes they just keep walking." He told me about a caretaker from the 1960s who'd quit after finding muddy footprints inside the chapel every night for a week, even though the doors were locked. Another who swore he saw a line of figures in faded uniforms standing at attention near the western fence, faces blank, eyes hollow. "You don't need to be scared," he said softly. "Just show respect. They ain't after you. They're just remembering." That night I brought a lantern and walked to the far side of the cemetery where the unmarked graves were. The air felt colder there, heavy with moisture and silence. I stood in front of that small wooden cross, held the lantern up, and spoke out loud. "I don't know your name," I said, voice shaking, "but I see you. I know you were here." The woods seemed to breathe around me, leaves rustling, fog shifting. Then just faintly I heard that same low voice, like a whisper carried on the wind. "Home." And then silence. The lantern flickered once and went out. I didn't see him again after that night. The generator stopped cutting out. The boot prints never came back. But sometimes when I walk past the older graves, I feel it. That weight in the air, like a quiet acknowledgement. Like someone standing just out of sight, keeping watch. A month later, I was cleaning out the tool shed when I found an old envelope tucked behind a loose board. It was yellowed, the paper brittle. Inside was a photograph, grainy black and white, showing a line of Union soldiers standing in front of a wooden fence. On the back, written in fading ink, were the words Pine Hollow, 1864. 21st Regiment, Company D. One of the faces in the picture caught my breath. Same hollow eyes. Same tired expression. Same man. I put the photo back in the envelope and slid it under the wooden cross that evening, where the fog still gathered like memory. I stayed on as caretaker another 2 years. Every night I'd walk the path between the stones, and sometimes, when the wind died and the moon hung low, I'd swear I heard that same low humming drifting through the trees. Not haunting anymore. Almost peaceful. It's been 12 years since I left Pine Hollow. I live in Harrisburg now, working maintenance at a hospital. I don't talk much about what happened, not because I'm afraid people won't believe me, but because I don't think it matters if they do. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I'll wake to that same distant rhythm, boots on gravel, faint humming through the dark, and I'll whisper, "I remember you." Then it fades, and the night settles back into silence. Maybe that's all he ever were, and had someone to remember. I never planned on taking a job at a cemetery. It just kind of happened after everything else in my life fell apart. 2 years ago, I lost my construction job when the company went under. The pandemic slowed everything. My marriage ended not long after, and I found myself back in the same town I swore I'd never return to. Ridgevale, a small patch of forgotten land tucked between rolling fields and empty roads. The kind of place where time feels like it's waiting for something that never comes. My uncle, Harold, was the caretaker at the local graveyard, St. Marlowe's Rest. When he heard I was back, he offered me work. "Graveyard shift's open," he said over the phone, his voice rough with years of whiskey and cold nights. "Ain't much, but it's quiet. Pays on time. You'll like it." I didn't like it, but I needed it. The first night was colder than I expected. Early October. The kind of chill that crawls in slow steady, like it's testing your bones before settling in. Uncle Harold met me by the old caretaker's cabin, a lopsided shack sitting at the edge of the property, lit by one flickering porch bulb. He handed me a thermos of coffee and a key ring that looked older than the cabin itself. "You don't need to do much," he said. "Lock the main gate at midnight. Check the fences once or twice. If you hear folks messing around, just flash your light and yell. They'll scatter." I nodded, trying not to look like I was second-guessing the whole thing. Before heading out, Harold looked past me toward the northern fence, a thin line of iron barely holding back the woods. "Don't sit in the chair," he muttered. I laughed. "What chair?" He didn't answer, just stared toward the dark, then handed me the flashlight. For the first week, everything was simple. I made my rounds, listened to the coyotes howl out near the tree line, checked that the chapel doors were locked, and passed the time by calling my sister or scrolling through my phone. The graveyard was peaceful, in a strange way. Rows of stones stretched out under the fog, some so old the names were gone. The chapel bell tower stood crooked, its rusted cross pointing slightly off toward the woods. After a few nights, I started to feel at ease, even proud. I'd get home before sunrise, hands numb from cold but mind quiet for once. The silence helped me think. Then, one night, I noticed the chair. It sat by the northern fence, half buried in ivy, facing the oldest part of the cemetery. It wasn't fancy, just a wooden chair, worn smooth from weather and time. Looked like something a carpenter might have made a century ago. I radioed Harold about it the next morning. He chuckled dryly. "Still there, huh?" "Been sitting there longer than I've been alive." "You said not to sit in it," I reminded him. "Yep. Why?" He was quiet a moment, then said, "Some things don't like being disturbed." That's all he said. Wouldn't explain further. A few nights later, I was patching a section of fence near that same northern edge when I realized I'd forgotten my hammer back by the chapel. By the time I returned, the fog had rolled in thick. Couldn't see 5 feet in front of me. As I made my way back, my flashlight caught the outline of that chair again. Only this time it wasn't empty. Someone was sitting there. I stopped dead. The fog thinned just enough to show a shape. A man, or at least it looked like one. Shoulders hunched forward, hands resting on his knees. "Hey," I called out, gripping my flashlight tight. "Park's closed. You can't be here." No answer. The shape didn't move. I took a cautious step closer. My boots crunched over gravel. The air grew colder. Not just cold, wrong. Like the temperature dropped only around that one spot. "Sir, you hear me?" I called again, still nothing, when I lifted my flashlight again and he was gone. The chair was empty, slick with dew, as if no one had been there at all. The next morning, I found Harold sitting on the porch of the caretaker's cabin, smoking his usual cheap cigars. I told him what I'd seen. He stared at me for a long time, then said, "That chair's been watching longer than any of us have been breathing." "Watching what?" I asked. "The graves," he said softly. "Or maybe whoever's dumb enough to sit in it. My granddad used to say a man built it for his wife after she passed. He'd sit there every night talking to her. Then one day he didn't get up." I laughed nervously. "You mean he died there?" Harold looked at me, not amused. "He stayed. Some say he never stopped watching." He flicked ash off his cigar. "Whatever you do, kid, you see that chair, you leave it be. And don't forget faces." 2 weeks later, we had a power outage. All the floodlights around the cemetery went out, leaving the place swallowed in black. It was around 1:30 a.m. I was near the chapel when I noticed a faint glow by the northern fence, like a lantern. It flickered, moved slowly, then stopped. Thinking some teenagers had snuck in, I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward it. The air was heavy with mist, my breath clouding in front of me. When I got closer, I realized the light wasn't moving and it was breathing, like it pulsed with the rhythm of someone's chest. The glow faded as I reached the chair, and there on the seat lay a pair of old spectacles. Rusted, one lens cracked. When I reached out to pick them up, the wood beneath my fingers felt warm. Not room temperature warm, body warm. I jerked back, my heart thudding. Then I heard it. A whisper. Low, drawn out, like wind pushing through hollow pipes. Sit a while. I swung the flashlight around, nothing. The sound came again, softer. He's tired. Let him rest. I backed away fast, nearly tripping over a headstone. When I looked back, the spectacles were gone. A month later, Harold retired for good. Said his knees couldn't take another winter, handed me the caretaker's keys, and told me to mind the chair. The town hired a new groundskeeper to help me, Rick. Mid-20s, always joking, always late. He thought the whole thing was funny. Man, you're telling me a chair freaks you out? He laughed the first night I warned him. What's it gonna do? And swivel menacingly. Just stay away from it, I told him. Yeah. You sound like my grandma when she talks about Ouija boards. It was near Christmas when things got worse. Snow covered most of the graves, and the nights grew brutally cold. Rick started skipping shifts, leaving me alone more often. One night I found him out by the northern fence, standing perfectly still in front of the chair. His back was to me. Rick, I called. He didn't move. When I reached him, I saw his breath hanging in the air. Slow, shallow, like he was half asleep. His hands rested on the back of the chair, his fingers digging into the wood. Rick, hey! I shook his shoulder. He blinked, dazed, then looked at me like he didn't recognize me. You okay? He nodded, then whispered. He asked me to sit. My stomach dropped. Who did? Rick stared into the dark beyond the fence. The man in the hat. After that night, Rick quit. Wouldn't even come back to grab his last paycheck. He told me over text, can't sleep. He's in the corner of my room. Keeps whispering for me to finish the watch. I tried calling, no answer. The next morning, his sister said he left town. No forwarding address. That night, when I went to lock the main gate, I noticed something carved into the wood of the chair's backrest. Fresh marks. Deep. Uneven. It said, he still keeps watch. I started hearing things after that. Low murmurs near the fence line. Footsteps crunching snow when I was sure I was alone. Once I found my lantern burning out by the chair. Though I'd left it in the cabin, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of sitting there, watching rows of graves as something cold and heavy pressed down on my shoulders. In the dream, I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. I started keeping a journal, writing down everything I saw. The entries got shorter over time, my handwriting shakier. John 14, footsteps again near fence. No one there. Jan 16, chair looks cleaner. Fresh polish. Jan 21, dreamed of him again. Hat, long coat. Smiling. It was February 9th when I decided I'd had enough. I brought a hatchet and a can of kerosene. Told myself I was burning that damn chair once and for all. The night was windless, the moon hidden. I approached from the chapel path, flashlight cutting through the fog. The chair stood waiting, same as always, facing the oldest graves. Up close. It looked almost new, wood shining faintly. Not a crack in sight. I raised the hatchet, ready to swing or dare when I felt it. Two hands, resting gently on my shoulders. Cold war, firm, real. I froze. The weight pressed down, steady as stone. My breath came out in shivers. A voice calm and low spoke just beside my ear. He isn't done watching. I swung the hatchet blindly behind me. Hit nothing. When I turned, the air shimmered, and for a moment I saw him. A man, tall, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, face pale as moonlight. He smiled, then gestured toward the chair. Sit. A while, my knees buckled. I don't know if I fell or was pulled, but the next thing I remember was sitting. The wood felt warm under me. The world around me slowed, blurred. The fog thickened until all I could see were the graves, endless still. Then I felt someone behind me, hands over mine, breathing against my ear. Now you see. The cemetery lit up, faintly at first, then bright. Dozens of shapes moved between the stones, pale, flickering, human but not. Each stood by a grave, unmoving, watching. One turned its head toward me, Its face was blank, hollow, and I realized every one of them was sitting in a chair just like mine. I screamed, but no sound came out. The world faded into silence. They found me at dawn, sitting in that chair, hands gripping the armrests so tight my nails had split. The hatchet was gone. The kerosene spilled. I told them I must have passed out from exhaustion. No one believed me, but no one asked questions either. They never do in Ridgevale, Ithata. I quit that day, packed up, left town. But sometimes when I drive past the old roads, I swear I can still see that cemetery through the fog and the chair. It's always there, always facing the graves, always waiting. I dream of it often, the sound of wood creaking, the whisper that always follows. Sit a while longer, he isn't done watching, and I wake up feeling that same cold pressure on my shoulders. I never planned on spending half my life with the dead. When I first took the job at Riverside Memorial Cemetery back in 1997, it was supposed to be temporary, just a way to make ends meet after the plant closed down. I was 23, broke, and sleeping on my cousin's couch in a Rust Belt town that time had mostly forgotten. The cemetery sat on the edge of Harlan, Ohio, tucked between a patch of woods and the old freight line. It was small, maybe 3 acres total, but it carried more history than anything else in that town. The oldest stones dated back to the 1860s, cracked and leaning like bad teeth, names almost rubbed away. Old Mr. Parson, the groundskeeper before me, had gone near blind and couldn't push the mower anymore. He handed me the keys with a trembling hand and said something I still remember word for word. "Boy, this place don't rest easy. Keep the gate locked after sundown, always." At the time, I laughed it off. Every old man in Ohio has some ghost story to go with his arthritis. But that first winter, I stopped laughing. The cemetery office was a cramped little shack with peeling blue paint and a wood stove that smoked more than it heated. I worked the night shift because no one else wanted it. The city paid extra for after-hours supervision, which mostly meant sitting in that shack from 10 p.m. to sunrise, keeping an eye out for vandals or teenagers sneaking in to drink. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, a portable radio, and a deck of cards. Sometimes I'd walk the paths between graves with my flashlight when I got too tired to sit still. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're underwater. On my second week, I met Harvey Boone, the head caretaker. Big guy, beard down to his chest, voice like a busted muffler. He'd worked there since the 70s. He called everyone kid, even if they were 50. "Kid," he told me one night, "don't let the silence fool you. Things move in this place, wind shifts strange here, you'll see." I smirked. "You mean ghosts?" He leaned back in his chair, picked a splinter from his palm and said, "I mean the kind of quiet that remembers." I didn't ask him to explain. It was late February, just past midnight, when I saw him. The snow was falling light, those soft flakes that hang in the air like dust. I was making rounds with my flashlight when I caught movement near the north gate. A figure stood, just beyond the fence, still as a statue. At first I thought it was a kid, maybe 14, 15 tops. He wore an old-fashioned coat buttoned up to the throat and suspenders that looked too short. His hair was wet, slicked down over his forehead. "Hey," I called out, "you're not supposed to be out there this late." He didn't move, walked closer, boots crunching through the snow. "You hear me, kid?" He just stared, eyes wide, pale blue like fogged glass. And then lightning, real close, flashed over the hill, and for half a heartbeat, I swear I could see through him, like his outline thinned into the storm. When I blinked, he was gone. I checked the road, the ditch, even the field past the fence. Nothing. No footprints. Just snow and the hum of wind through the trees. I didn't tell Harvey. I didn't tell anyone. Because the mind can play tricks when it's 3 in the morning and all you've got is caffeine and dead company. A few nights later, Harvey came by to drop off supplies. He looked tired, chewing tobacco like it was breakfast. "You ever see the gate boy yet?" he asked suddenly. "The what?" He spat into the snow. "That little bastard that shows up when it storms. Been around since before I started. Folks call him the gate boy of Riverside." I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. You're serious? Oh, yeah. Shows up at the north gate, stands there like he's waiting for someone. Don't talk, don't move. Then poof, gone. He shrugged. Every groundskeeper sees him sooner or later. Lucky if it's just once. Who is he supposed to be? Harvey scratched his chin. Nobody knows. There's old graves up by the ridge. Flood took the names off them long ago. Might be one of those kids, or maybe just the storm itself, taking shape to watch. I tried to change the subject, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking when I poured coffee that night. A week later, another storm rolled in from the west. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the window panes. Around midnight, I heard something outside. Metal scraping metal. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The wind nearly shoved me off my feet. The gate, the north gate, was swinging open and shut, screeching like a hinge from hell, and there he was again. The boy. Same spot, same wet clothes, same unblinking stare. "Kid," I yelled. "You need to get home. It's not safe out here." He tilted his head just slightly, like he was studying me. Then he raised one hand and pointed, past me toward the back of the cemetery where the oldest graves lay under the willow trees. "What? You want me to go there?" I shouted. No response. Just that same slow tilt of his head. Another flash of lightning. Gone. The next morning, I followed where he'd pointed. The ground there was uneven, headstones half sunk and covered in moss. I brushed one off and for the first time, felt something like a cold pulse under my palm. Like the earth itself was shivering. The stone read, Caleb Morris, 1885, 1893, 8 years old. I went to the county archives the next day, told the clerk I was looking into cemetery history. She pointed me to a row of dusty ledgers that smelled like wet paper. After a few hours, I found him. Caleb Morris, son of Samuel and Lydia Morris, died in a winter accident according to the record. No details. But another entry caught my eye. Same date, same location. Gate collapse, north entrance of Riverside. A metal gate had fallen on him. The record said his father tried to lift it, but by the time help came, the boy was gone. I closed the book and just sat there, staring at my reflection in the glass of the archive window. The next storm didn't take long. 2 nights later, the sky turned the color of bruises and the air buzzed like a bad wire. I parked my truck by the office and waited. Midnight passed. Nothing. 1 a.m. Nothing. Then I heard it. 3 slow clangs of iron against stone. When I reached the north gate, the padlock was unlatched. The gate stood open, creaking gently in the wind. And inside, under the maple tree, stood Caleb. This time, he wasn't outside. "Caleb?" I said before I even realized I'd spoken. He turned his head toward me, slow as if it pained him. His lips parted, and I swear on my life I heard the faintest whisper. "You opened it." My stomach dropped. Lightning split the sky, and for that flash I saw something behind him. Shapes. Small, half-formed, like children made of mist, standing in a row. Then they were gone. I ran back to the shack, locked the door, and stayed there, until sunrise, shaking so hard I spilled coffee down my jeans. When Harvey came in the morning, I told him everything. He just stared for a long time and said, "You need to leave that gate shut, son. You ain't supposed to answer him." For a while, things calmed down. Spring came. The grass grew thick again. The river thawed. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Lack of sleep, caffeine, maybe even carbon monoxide from that old heater. Then, one May morning, I found small, bare footprints in the mud leading from the north gate straight to Caleb's grave. No one had keys except me and Harvey. That afternoon, I drove to Harvey's house to tell him. His wife opened the door, eyes red from crying. "Harvey passed last night," she said. "Heart attack, they think. My legs nearly gave out." 2 nights after the funeral, I went back to work because I didn't know what else to do. The air felt heavy, like something waiting. I brought extra lanterns, lit every single one. The storm came around midnight. Wind howled, thunder rolled, and rain slammed sideways against the windows. Then the office lights flickered and went out. From outside came the sound of footsteps, not running, just walking slow through the wet grass. I stood up, heart pounding. "Harvey?" I called out, though I knew better. Silence. Then, creak, the north gate. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped into the storm, and followed the path. The beam shook in my hand. When I reached the hill, the gate was wide open. Caleb stood, there, closer than ever before, maybe 10 feet away. His skin was gray in the lightning, water dripping from his hair. "Why do you keep opening it?" I shouted over the wind. "What do you want?" He blinked slowly, then said, voice barely audible, "Home." He pointed behind me. I turned and saw the graves along the ridge glowing faintly, like the earth itself was remembering them. Figures stood over each stone, children, dozens of them, all watching me. The wind stopped, everything went still, and then in that silence the ground beneath my feet trembled. One by one, the graves began to sink, soil collapsing inward like something was clawing its way up from below. I ran. I don't remember how I made it back to the shack, only that when I slammed the door behind me, mud coated my hands and the lock was gone, just melted metal on the ground. I quit the next morning, didn't even collect my paycheck. 3 weeks later, the city closed the cemetery for restoration. They fenced it off, citing erosion damage. Locals said vandals had been breaking in, but I knew better. Sometimes on stormy nights when I'm home and the thunder rolls across the valley, I swear I hear it. The slow creak of that north gate swinging open again, and when the lightning flashes I can see him at the edge of the yard, drenched and still, waiting for someone to let him in. I've never gone back. But I keep the porch, light on every time it rains, because for some children the storm is still the only way home. I never planned on spending half my life with the dead. When I first took the job at Riverside Memorial Cemetery back in 1997, it was supposed to be temporary, just a way to make ends meet after the plant closed down. I was 23, broke, and sleeping on my cousin's couch in a Rust Belt town that time had mostly forgotten. The cemetery sat on the edge of Harlan, Ohio, tucked between a patch of woods and the old freight line. It was small, maybe 3 acres total, but it carried more history than anything else in that town. The oldest stones dated back to the 1860s, cracked and leaning like bad teeth, names almost rubbed away. Old Mr. Parson, the groundskeeper before me, had gone near blind and couldn't push the mower anymore. He handed me the keys with a trembling hand and said something I still remember word for word. "Boy, this place don't rest easy. Keep the gate locked after sundown, always." At the time, I laughed it off. Every old man in Ohio has some ghost story to go with his arthritis. But that first winter, I stopped laughing. The cemetery office was a cramped little shack with peeling blue paint and a wood stove that smoked more than it heated. I worked the night shift because no one else wanted it. The city paid extra for after-hours supervision, which mostly meant sitting in that shack from 10 p.m. to sunrise, keeping an eye out for vandals or teenagers sneaking in to drink. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, a portable radio, and a deck of cards. Sometimes I'd walk the paths between graves with my flashlight when I got too tired to sit still. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're underwater. On my second week, I met Harvey Boone, the head caretaker. Big guy, beard down to his chest, voice like a busted muffler. He'd worked there since the 70s. He called everyone kid, even if they were 50. "Kid," he told me one night, "don't let the silence fool you. Things move in this place, wind shifts strange here, you'll see." I smirked. "You mean ghosts?" He leaned back in his chair, picked a splinter from his palm and said, "I mean the kind of quiet that remembers." I didn't ask him to explain. It was late February, just past midnight, when I saw him. The snow was falling light, those soft flakes that hang in the air like dust. I was making rounds with my flashlight when I caught movement near the north gate. A figure stood, just beyond the fence, still as a statue. At first I thought it was a kid, maybe 14, 15 tops. He wore an old-fashioned coat buttoned up to the throat and suspenders that looked too short. His hair was wet, slicked down over his forehead. "Hey," I called out. "You're not supposed to be out there this late." He didn't move. Walked closer, boots crunching through the snow. "You hear me, kid?" He just stared, eyes wide, pale blue like fogged glass. And then lightning, real close, flashed over the hill, and for half a heartbeat, I swear I could see through him. Like his outline thinned into the storm. When I blinked, he was gone. I checked the road, the ditch, even the field past the fence. Nothing. No footprints. Just snow and the hum of wind through the trees. I didn't tell Harvey. I didn't tell anyone. Because the mind can play tricks when it's 3 a.m. and all you've got is caffeine and dead company. A few nights later, Harvey came by to drop off supplies. He looked tired, chewing tobacco like it was breakfast. "You ever see the gate boy yet?" he asked suddenly. "The what?" He spat into the snow. "That little bastard that shows up when it storms. Been around since before I started. Folks call him the gate boy of Riverside." I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "You're serious?" "Oh, yeah. Shows up at the north gate, stands there like he's waiting for someone. Don't talk, don't move. Then poof, gone." He shrugged. "Every groundskeeper sees him sooner or later. Lucky if it's just once." "Who is he supposed to be?" Harvey scratched his chin. "Nobody knows. There's old graves up by the ridge. Flood took the names off them long ago. Might be one of those kids, or maybe just the storm itself, taking shape to watch." I tried to change the subject, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking when I poured coffee that night. A week later, another storm rolled in from the west. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the window panes. Around midnight, I heard something outside, metal scraping metal. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The wind nearly shoved me off my feet. The gate, the north gate, was swinging open and shut, screeching like a hinge from hell, and there he was again. The boy. Same spot, same wet clothes, same unblinking stare. "Kid," I yelled. "You need to get home. It's not safe out here." He tilted his head just slightly, like he was studying me. Then he raised one hand and pointed, past me toward the back of the cemetery where the oldest graves lay under the willow trees. "What? You want me to go there?" I shouted. No response. Just that same slow tilt of his head. Another flash of lightning. Gone. The next morning, I followed where he'd pointed. The ground there was uneven, headstones half sunk and covered in moss. I brushed one off and for the first time, felt something like a cold pulse under my palm. Like the earth itself was shivering. The stone read, Caleb Morris, 1885, 1893, 8 years old. I went to the county archives the next day. Told the clerk I was looking into cemetery history. She pointed me to a row of dusty ledgers that smelled like wet paper. After a few hours, I found him. Caleb Morris, son of Samuel and Lydia Morris, died in a winter accident according to the record. No details. But another entry caught my eye. Same date, same location. Gate collapse, north entrance of Riverside. A metal gate had fallen on him. The record said his father tried to lift it, but by the time help came, the boy was gone. I closed the book and just sat there, staring at my reflection in the glass of the archive window. The next storm didn't take long. 2 nights later, the sky turned the color of bruises and the air buzzed like a bad wire. I parked my truck by the office and waited. Midnight passed. Nothing. 1 a.m. Nothing. Then I heard it. 3 slow clangs of iron against stone. When I reached the north gate, the padlock was unlatched. The gate stood open, creaking gently in the wind. And inside, under the maple tree, stood Caleb. This time, he wasn't outside. "Caleb?" I said before I even realized I'd spoken. He turned his head toward me, slow as if it pained him. His lips parted, and I swear on my life I heard the faintest whisper. "You opened it." My stomach dropped. Lightning split the sky, and for that flash I saw something behind him. Shapes. Small, half-formed, like children made of mist, standing in a row. Then they were gone. I ran back to the shack, locked the door, and stayed there, until sunrise, shaking so hard I spilled coffee down my jeans. When Harvey came in the morning, I told him everything. He just stared for a long time and said, "You need to leave that gate shut, son. You ain't supposed to answer him." For a while, things calmed down. Spring came. The grass grew thick again. The river thawed. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Lack of sleep, caffeine, maybe even carbon monoxide from that old heater. Then, one May morning, I found small, bare footprints in the mud leading from the north gate straight to Caleb's grave. No one had keys except me and Harvey. That afternoon, I drove to Harvey's house to tell him. His wife opened the door, eyes red from crying. "Harvey passed last night," she said. "Heart attack, they think. My legs nearly gave out." 2 nights after the funeral, I went back to work because I didn't know what else to do. The air felt heavy, like something waiting. I brought extra lanterns, lit every single one. The storm came around midnight. Wind howled, thunder rolled, and rain slammed sideways against the windows. Then the office lights flickered and went out. From outside came the sound of footsteps, not running, just walking slow through the wet grass. I stood up, heart pounding. "Harvey?" I called out, though I knew better. Silence. Then, creak, the north gate. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped into the storm, and followed the path. The beam shook in my hand. When I reached the hill, the gate was wide open. Caleb stood, there, closer than ever before, maybe 10 feet away. His skin was gray in the lightning, water dripping from his hair. "Why do you keep opening it?" I shouted over the wind. "What do you want?" He blinked slowly, then said, voice barely audible, "Home." He pointed behind me. I turned and saw the graves along the ridge glowing faintly, like the earth itself was remembering them. Figures stood over each stone, children, dozens of them, all watching me. The wind stopped, everything went still, and then in that silence the ground beneath my feet trembled. One by one, the graves began to sink, soil collapsing inward like something was clawing its way up from below. I ran. I don't remember how I made it back to the shack, only that when I slammed the door behind me, mud coated my hands and the lock was gone, just melted metal on the ground. I quit the next morning, didn't even collect my paycheck. 3 weeks later, the city closed the cemetery for restoration. They fenced it off, citing erosion damage. Locals said vandals had been breaking in, but I knew better. Sometimes, on stormy nights when I'm home and the thunder rolls across the valley, I swear I hear it. The slow creak of that north gate swinging open again, and when the lightning flashes I can see him at the edge of the yard, drenched and still, waiting for someone to let him in. I've never gone back. But I keep the porch, light on every time it rains, because for some children the storm is still the only way home. I took the caretaker's job at Hollow Creek Memorial because, truth be told, I didn't have much else going for me. It was early October, the kind of season when the air smells like rain-soaked leaves and cold metal. I'd been out of steady work for months, ever since the mill shut down over in Renshaw. The owner, Old Man Tiller, had promised we'd all be called back once things picked up again. They never did. So when I saw the notice tacked up at the post office, caretaker, wanted Hollow Creek Cemetery, lodging provided, I figured, hell, why not? I wasn't scared of cemeteries. I grew up around small-town graveyards, the kind where your own relatives stare back at you from headstones during Easter picnics. Besides, Hollow Creek was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. That's what drew me. The caretaker's cabin sat just beyond the north gate, a small 2-room shack with chipped green paint and a stovepipe that whistled every time the wind came from the river. The first night I slept there, I could hear frogs calling from the creek and the hum of insects pressed against the window screen. Peaceful in its own strange way, but I should have known peace never lasts long in places like that. My name's Walter Crane. Folks in Renshaw used to call me Walt. I'm 52 now, and if there's one thing I learned from years of working nights, it's that silence can lie to you. The cemetery was spread out over 12 acres, with sections dating back to the 1800s. The newer graves lay near the chapel, neat rows with polished granite stones and plastic flowers. But the old section, up near the hilltop, folks didn't visit there much. You could tell by the way the earth had caved around the older markers, tilting them like drunks at a wake. The first few weeks, I spent most of my shifts patching fence, lines, clearing brush, and keeping the chapel lit for weekend services. Simple work. But there were odd things too, like the time I found all the chapel pew cushions stacked neatly in the aisle one morning, though I was the only one with a key. Or when I noticed the flowers from the older graves, especially the ones near the east path, had been rearranged overnight into neat concentric circles. "Kids," said Mr. Holman, the grounds manager. "High schoolers screwing around, don't think too much of it." I didn't, not at first. The night it started, the fog rolled in thick and sudden, like someone had poured milk into the air. The forecast hadn't called for it, but Hollow Creek always had its moods. I was finishing my rounds, locking up the chapel doors. The light from my lantern spilled weakly over the gravel path. That's when I noticed movement beyond the eastern trail, just at the edge of the light. At first, I figured it was a deer, maybe a vagrant cutting through. But when I squinted through the fog, I saw them. A line of figures, 10, maybe 12. They were walking in single file, moving slow, almost ritual-like. Long black coats, high collars, faces veiled like mourners. None carried a light. None made a sound. "Evenin'," I called out, my voice swallowed by the fog. "Cemetery's closed, folks." No answer. They just kept walking, heading toward the hill, the oldest section of the grounds. My gut tightened. There hadn't been any burials scheduled that night. "Hey," I shouted again. "You hear me?" Still nothing. My boots crunched on the gravel as I stepped closer. The sound of my own footsteps felt too loud. When I was about 30 yards away, one of them turned slightly, not fully, just enough that I saw the glint of pale skin beneath the veil. Then they all stopped, perfectly still. I swear I could hear the fog breathing between us. Then, without a word, they started moving again, up toward the hilltop. Something in me, maybe duty, maybe stupid curiosity, told me to follow. The eastern path was slick with dew, and the fog thickened as I climbed. My lantern's flame trembled, fighting against the damp air. I could still see the faint sway of their coats ahead, moving in rhythm. No footsteps, no voices, just that steady, soundless march. By the time I reached the crest, my lungs burned. The lantern light spread across the clearing, empty. No figures, no lanterns, no graves freshly dug, but the ground was disturbed. Footprints, dozens of them, pressed deep into the soil, forming a perfect circle around the center of the clearing. Knelt, brushing my fingers along the prints. The soil was ice cold, and beneath it, faint but real, I felt something, a vibration. Like the hum of a distant bell. A shiver ran through me, and then behind me, a voice. Soft. Right by my ear. "Late, aren't you?" I spun so fast I nearly dropped the lantern. Nothing there. Just fog curling close, whispering against the stones. My heart hammered. "Who's there?" Silence. The flame flickered once, twice, then snuffed out. And then came the sound. Boots, soft, deliberate, surrounding me in the dark. I could feel movement, like air being pushed by unseen bodies. A brush against my sleeve. Something cold, touching the back of my neck. "Show yourselves," I yelled. The whispers grew louder, dozens of voices murmuring over one another. "He's come at last." Too late. Too late. I dropped to my knees. The ground beneath me felt hollow, like something beneath was shifting, breathing. My hand sank into the soil. When I pulled them free, I brought up something smooth and pale. Bone. Then, silence. The fog lifted. The clearing was empty. Only the circle of footprints remained. I filled that shallow hole with shaking hands and stumbled, back toward the cabin. The entire walk down, I could hear footsteps just behind me, soft, measured, matching my own. I didn't dare look back. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin made my skin crawl. Around 3 a.m, I heard gravel shifting outside my window. Step, step, step. When I peeked through the curtain, I saw the hilltop glowing faintly, as if 100 ghostly lanterns burned in the fog. And at the front of the procession, God, help me, I saw myself, a man in my black coat holding my lantern leading them uphill. I told no one for weeks. Then one morning, Holman came by with coffee. He looked pale. "You been up the East Hill lately?" he asked. I hesitated. "Why?" He rubbed his jaw. "Found prints up there again, dozens of them, all in a circle, fresh." He gave me a look like he didn't want to believe his own words. "Thing is," he said, "it rained last night, ground soft, should have washed away any old tracks, but those..." He trailed off. "They're pressed deep, like from boots that never lifted." 2 nights later, the fog came back. It was thicker this time. You could taste it, wet and bitter, like iron. I stayed inside the caretaker's house, window shutters drawn. But around 2 a.m, the marching started again. The same slow, heavy rhythm of unseen feet over gravel. Then came a knock. 3 soft raps against the door. I froze. "Who's there?" I managed. No answer. Another 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. Against all sense, I cracked the door open an inch. Fog poured in. And through it, I saw a figure standing just beyond the threshold. A man in a black coat, face veiled, holding a lantern. "My lantern!" He raised his head slightly. I saw my own face beneath the veil. Then he turned and began walking up the eastern path. The procession followed. I don't remember grabbing my jacket, or the way my hands shook as I followed, drawn like something under a spell. We reached the hilltop again, the same circle of footprints, only this time there was something new, a single open grave at the center. The veiled figures stopped and turned toward me. One by one they lifted their veils. Pale faces, sunken eyes, mouths that whispered without breath. "You led us once," one of them said, her voice dry as dust. "Lead us again." I stumbled backward. "No, I'm not..." But the earth gave way beneath me. The lantern fell, its flame smothered in the dirt. The cold closed around me. The last thing I heard was their footsteps retreating, slow, deliberate, back down the hill. When they found the caretaker's cabin a week later, it was empty, the stove still warm. The logbook on the table stopped mid-sentence. "Fog coming in thick tonight." I hear them again. The East Hill has been fenced off since, but folks in Hollow Creek still talk about it. How, on fog-heavy nights, you can hear the faint rhythm of boots along the gravel, moving in a perfect circle. And sometimes if you stand near the gate long enough, you'll see a lantern's glow weaving through the mist, leading the silent procession up the hill. They say it's the caretaker. They say he still walks among